Learning from textbooks and books in general is a fundamental skill in life, and it can be difficult to absorb knowledge from very big, thick, heavy textbooks. However, a few years ago, I stumbled on a skill and I've used it ever since and refined it slightly and have been able to pass some complex cybersecurity exams. But to be honest, this method is just a learning method and applies to any field, any industry, anything you're trying to learn. It's a learning and productivity skill, not a cybersecurity skill. So this video is going to be me sharing my primary learning method for textbook-based learning, and this also applies to other documentation you might read within tech or cybersecurity or anything else, like policies and standards, procedures, technical documentation, help guides, and any other documentation you might come across. Now, you might adjust it slightly depending on the content you're actually reading, but the underlying principle still applies. So if you're interested in becoming a better learner and absorbing and retaining more knowledge, then carry on watching this video. Now, typically when you start learning, what you do is you start on page 1 and you work your way through and take a ton of notes all the way throughout. So you start at the beginning of the chapter, take a bunch of notes, read the content, do the questions at the end, and you rinse and repeat. And this is a method I used to use, and I think most people use this method still. But the main problem here is you end up rereading the book a few times and have to actually repeat this method 3 to 5 times, or maybe even more, because you haven't actually learned enough on your first pass of the textbook to then put the textbook down and take the exam, or apply the knowledge in any other way. And it can be really frustrating because it takes so long to actually get through one of these books, but then doing this 3 to 5 times will just take you forever. So the method I'm going to be talking about makes this a lot simpler, and if you do it properly, you will not have to repeat the textbook once you've finished. So this textbook helps you absorb the information like a sponge, and I actually got this from Matt DiMario's video titled How to Absorb Textbooks Like a Sponge. I will link that in the description. And this method works for many reasons. One of the main reasons it works is something called the reticular activating system within your brain, also known as R.A.S. or R.A.S. I'm obviously not a brain scientist, and I'm sure this part of your brain does other things too, but essentially the part of the R.A.S.'s functions that we're interested in is the fact that it can highlight information amongst a sea of other information. Now, that might not make sense, but take this as an example. Let's say you and your friend are talking about the newest Nike Jordan 1s and you wanted to buy some. So you have this conversation, you talk about the different types, you might look at some pictures, whatever. Now, the next day you're walking around, you'll start to notice people who have those pairs of trainers, and you'll start to be more aware of advertisements. So if you walk past a shop and they're selling them, you'll probably quickly spot that and maybe even look at the pricing and notice a lot more, because you've had that discussion about that. It's highlighted this awareness of it, and now you start to see it everywhere you go, or previously you wouldn't have really noticed that. In a similar way, your wife or partner said, we need a new kettle, and you'll be at the shop the next day. You won't even be thinking about the kettle, but then you'll spot one on the shelf and you think, oh yeah, my wife mentioned we need one. So in a way, unconsciously, you're kind of priming yourself to spot things that you should be aware of for a particular reason, or because it's recently been talked about in a conversation, or it's something you might need, etc., etc. And that's a kind of system that we're trying to activate in your brain, but apply it to your textbook learning. So this method basically uses that function of your brain and highlights the key parts of the information you need and allows them to jump out at you. And this will never happen if you just start on page 1 and work your way through the book, because you don't know what to focus in on or what to spot or what is important. So yeah, that's one of the reasons this method's amazing, but we'll get into it. So step 1, what you do is you start off on the chapter you want to learn, and the first step is very simple. You literally just flip through each page of the chapter and you just look at it. You don't write anything down, you just take a second or two to look at the page, you look at the pictures, the graphs, the diagrams, the structure. You observe how much text there is compared to pictures and diagrams, and it just starts to give you an idea of the structure of the chapter. Now then, when you get to the end of the chapter, what you need to do is you need to take some time to either read a summary. Normally at the end of the chapter, there's a summary that summarizes the information, and you also read the questions. Typically, textbooks are structured in this way. At the end of the chapter, there'll be a summary of the chapter and some questions to answer. Now, the questions are key because this is what the author of the book, or the authors, think is the most important thing for you to learn from that chapter. This is what they intended you to get and understand by the time you get to that page. This is what you should have learned in essence. You read those questions, you read the summary, and this is a part that triggers your internal radar or your reticular activating system, and it's giving you awareness of the content. Now, once you've done that, that's the second step of reading the summary. You go back to the beginning of the chapter for step 3. And step 3 is straightforward. You just focus and read the bold print. So again, you're flicking through each page. This time, you're taking a few more seconds to read the bold print, anything that's highlighted. And the reason is anything that isn't bold or being highlighted has been made that way for a reason. Typically, this is titles, subtitles, topic headings, and anything else in bold that kind of jumps out at you. So those are the key things you're going to need to read for the whole chapter. And then when you get to the end, what I would do is I would suggest rereading the summary and the questions one more time, essentially repeating step 2. And once you're done, for step 4, you go back to the beginning. You read the first and last sentence of every single paragraph. Yes, every paragraph. And the reason for this is typically the first sentence in a paragraph introduces and opens up about that topic or piece of information, and the last sentence summarizes it. So here you're getting some exposure to the actual content itself, and you're also reading the bold print too at this stage. So you're reading the bold prints, the headings, the subheadings, first and last sentence. And you don't need to understand the ins and outs of everything at this stage. This isn't for comprehension and understanding. This is just for exposure to the content itself. And the last stage is the most interesting, and it basically what you would traditionally do is you go back to page 1 of the chapter and you read through it as you normally would and take notes. However, the key difference is at this stage your brain is set up and it already has an understanding of what is important, and you have an overview of what's coming up, the structure, what to expect, etc, etc. And I guess the reason why it works is you've mentally already mapped content, the questions, this chapter, everything out in your head, and by using unconsciously the reticular activating system, once you come across a certain piece of content, your brain will know this is actually very important. There are 3 questions about this. I need to focus in and make sure I understand this. And similarly, if you see something that's just a footnote or some information or goes off on a little bit of a tangent, you know not to pay too much attention to that because there's nothing asked about that. At step 5, when you're reading through and taking notes, you can already connect the ideas to the topics, to the questions. You know what's important, you know what areas to focus on, and you know what to pay a lot more attention to, and you know what areas are not going to be as important. So I hope by that explanation you can kind of see why that's useful. And I've got a couple of bonus tips for you as well. Now you might be thinking this is actually longer than just reading the book normally and taking notes, but overall, trust me, it's a lot shorter, because when you deep it, you only have to do this once. If you're just reading through and taking notes, you might have to do that 2 to 5 to 10 times before you've got enough information retained. Doing this will save you a lot of time in the long run, and you won't need to go through the textbook again and again and again. Now, when it comes to step 5, of course, there are so many different ways of taking notes and retaining that information. So what I would recommend is you buy and read this book. I will link it in the description. Honestly, this book changed my life, and it's actually really short. So it's less than 200 pages, and you get most of the information from the first 30 pages. Literally, you can read the first 30 pages and you've got everything you need. The rest of the book just dives into a lot more detail. So yeah, one of the best books I've ever read, and definitely significantly improved my note-taking abilities and made me a better professional because I was so much more organized with my topics and areas and everything I need to know for cybersecurity consulting, which is my day-to-day job. Now, another helpful tip I would also recommend is actually buying one of these stands. I picked up a HLS stand from Amazon. Essentially, you just put your book in there and it holds it up for you. It's just better. I'm constantly like looking down and writing and moving around and trying to struggle learning that way. So buy a book stand. It helps you so much just for your eye level, helps with your back and posture and neck as well too. Lastly, if you want to access my Cyber Brain Notion template, where I just have free cybersecurity resources, some information about learning and courses you can take, then check out my Notion page in the description below. And if you want to support the channel, then sign up to Notion using my affiliate link so I can make more videos like this for you all. Just remember, knowledge is power. Systemize your learning as much as you can, and repetition is the mother of learning. Keep going, keep grinding, and keep studying and getting better at whatever it is you do. So if you've enjoyed this video, leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.